Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of Couple of Nukes. As always, I'm your host, Mr. Whiskey, and we love talking on the show about leadership, about the workplace, because it's so important. We used to have a saying in the military that your chain of command can make or break your experience. You could be stationed in the most beautiful base in the world and have the worst leadership, and you're getting out. Or you could be in the worst place in the world, Newport News, Virginia, shout out, and you could have the best leadership in the world and stay in and re-enlist. It really does make or break a job. And that is the same in the civilian world. We've all had leaders that we liked, employers that we liked, and we've all had some that we did not like, to put to some degree. Same with our coworkers. So it's important for us to be mindful because the world of leadership is ever evolving and changing as we move forward as a society, as individual businesses and companies change. And so we are here today with a woman who specializes in leadership and workplace development, Ms. Desiree Goldey. She is a part-time fashionista, according to her Instagram. You can check that out. And then she also does, like I said, a lot of leadership work and development. And we're going to talk today about how she got into that and what we can implement. So,
Uh,
Ms. Desiree,
wow, that was the best introduction I've had in a while. That was great. I
thank
love
you.
it. I love it so much. I am Desiree Goldey. My real title is Director of Marketing and Culture over at ZRG Partners, where we're a global talent advisory firm. I also own a consulting firm called Do Better Consulting, where we work with individuals to try to up their leadership game. And so it's a big topic for me and exciting topic as AI comes into play and the world of work starts to change. And I think that what we saw as leaders in 1950 is not what we're seeing as leaders today. And so I'm excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
For sure. And when I was researching your files, I can't remember where it was, but you said something that you're a firm believer that recruiting is the most difficult job after physical labor. Is that correct?
That is very correct. I believe that, first of all, most of us fell into recruiting. So it wasn't our life dream. We weren't little kids saying we wanted to be in
Right.
talent. No one says I want to be a recruiter when I grow up. Well, if they do, I want to meet them. But we all kind of fall into it, usually because we have a drive for people and process and just doing better for people's lives. And so that's how we usually end up here. And I do consider it one of the hardest things to do because there's so many multiple factors that come into play, and you're responsible for people's lives. And that, we're not doctors, but we
Right.
are changing people's lives every day. So it's a great job to have.
So in the military, you're either a good recruiter or a good person. You can't be both. So how would you say in the civilian world how you balance, honesty and feeling that billet, so to speak?
Yeah, I think it's very difficult for those that own their own kind of talent firms. I think it becomes easier to do this, right? Because you can, focus on your values and your morals and like you only take clients you want to work with and things like that. But if you're a corporate recruiter or an agency recruiter, you're held to KPIs and data and things you need to fill, roles you need to fill. And I think it becomes a little bit of a quandary about, is this the right thing to do sometimes, or am I just putting person in the seat because the hiring manager wants it or whatever? I still think most recruiters are genuinely good people, but you have to remember there's, seven layers of people above them that are making, wildly great decisions or bad decisions for their organizations, and they kind of have to follow that. They don't get to make all the determination.
For sure, and there are definitely people who get a little cash bonus dangled in front of them and some
Of
other
course.
incentives, whether that's promotion or what it may be. Now, I do
Yeah.
want to pivot, talking about recruiting and
Yeah.
personal bias, and then you
Yeah.
mentioned AI. Do you believe that all recruiters will be replaced by AI? Is that kind of the direction we're seeing the industry shift, or do you think that AI can recruit based off of, that the qualifications, all the hard skills, but it will never have that people person skill.
Yeah, I think the world of AI is about evolving faster than we know, right? Even than we think it is. Um, and I never believed that recruiters will be completely replaced. I do not believe that. There has to be some human element to the world of recruiting, especially in that soft skills place. But it is evolving to the point where it can take over a lot of the mundane tasks that live in recruiting. And that for recruiters should be a wake-up call to become more of a strategic person and less of just an order taker. I always talk about the order taking. We're just like filling a role and moving
Mm,
on to the next one. I think it should be more of a strategic point of view that you bring to the table and really understanding the business. And sometimes a lot of recruiters don't understand the business, they just understand filling the role. I do think it reduces the force in recruiting. At it, maybe not this year, but maybe next year. I think that some people do, they start to downsize some of the recruiting
right.
talent teams because they just don't need that many people when AI is doing so much of the administrative piece of the job.
Right. It's streamlining the process. So now instead of you getting 1,000, resumes or applications, now you're getting five that have, because of that 1,000, AI has filtered down, these are the five ideal candidates. And
Correct.
now you go and interview those people or talk to them. So it can
Right.
definitely streamline the process. But I think for the interview itself, hopefully we don't see that get replaced. It's interesting. I've done a lot of different interviews for different companies over the years, and I've gotten this, this sense of who's a good person and who's a bad person. I pay attention to who actually follows up, who, makes you chase after them and who chases after you. How do they present themselves in interview? Who offers you water or something to eat? You know, I've had some terrible interviews. I've had ones that were less than 5 minutes. It's just, okay, you want the job? Yeah, it looks like you're a good fit. That's it. And I was like, no, I'm not doing this. Because I said the other company did an hour-long interview and it was thorough, so
Right,
there's a big
right.
difference. But one of the best questions I was asked, only one out of all the interviews I've done, only one person has asked me this. They said, Mr. Whiskey, what can you tell me about you that's not on this resume? And see, that right there was that crucial part of, you know, your resume could be copy paste of everyone else that they're interviewing. So
Sure.
now tell me more about you. And I
Yeah,
don't know if the AI will ever be able to do that because even if it was programmed to ask that question, how is what is going to analyze the keywords, say, all right,
right,
Mr. Whiskey's response contained, these values of leadership or community, and, Ms. Desiree's contained, these hobbies or free time. Now, how does the AI weigh those, the
right.
way that a person does? So I
Right.
think that's a very
Well, this
interesting
is goes
development.
into the question of bias of things, right? And
Yeah.
AI scares me because of the bias of a robot, right? First of all, it's programmed and by a human. So if I am programmed, I naturally bring my bias to the table to program that thing to interpret something. And so that's where it gets a little tricky for me and a little scary for me with AI is because I think you could miss out on so much if you're bringing bias into the situation for AI. And it's so tricky to me, and I don't think we're anywhere close to figuring it out. I know there's some great people out there doing work in this, such as Torrin Ellis, who's doing some great work in figuring this all out. It's not me, but I do think that it can be a scary proposition to weigh my values through a robot. Right?
Right.
It seems like it doesn't really make sense. Plus, I also think it naturally a human can read a body language in an interview, right? Or pick up on cues that you have, or see if you're nervous, or and use that and weigh that with our critical minds, where
Mm,
AI and a robot's not going to be able to do that through you talking to it. And so I think there's these just naturally body language cues and soft skills that I think it may never really be the perfect model to do recruiting and talent, right? And so recruiters don't go away. Let me just
for
say that.
sure, for sure. It's interesting because like when I was asked that question, I said, well, in my free time and with my company, I like to do work in suicide prevention and awareness and addiction recovery for alcohol, pornography, drugs, whatever it may be. I like to help individuals with self-improvement. And how is an AI going to weigh that? Is it going to say, "Hey, well, Mr. Wishy, that sounds like some really important stuff." I mean, does an AI care about suicide prevention? What does it matter to it if someone takes
Right,
their life or not? So
right,
that
right,
kind of stuff too. And I like you said, the nervousness or the confidence,
right.
that's definitely
I mean,
something.
I've had tons of people come to interviews with me and just they have the perfect resume, right? But they just don't do interviewing well. But I've been doing this so long, I can say to myself, okay, gather your thoughts together about this person. They're the perfect resume. They were just a little nervous. And I try to coach them through that nervousness for the next interview and also recognize that that is how people sometimes show up. Or maybe they're having a bad day. Maybe they woke up with a headache. All the things in AI is
Yeah,
not going to be able to bring to the table, right?
for
And
sure.
so I think I do think in not just talent all over AI, there's so many conversations happening about how this affects the world of work, and talent is specifically high on that list. How does it affect hiring in the world of work? And I think it's going to be interesting to see how it falls out in the next couple of years.
Yeah, well, like you said, I've got a buddy, he's got a great resume, but he's like, "Mr. Wishy, I just can't do the interview part. I just suck at talking." He goes, and I was telling him about my experience. He goes, "See, if they had asked me that question, like, what's not on your resume?" He's like, "I would have just sat there like a jerk." He goes, "I don't know what I would have said." And a friend, she called me the other day with a story that blew my mind. They were interviewing people for the company she works at, and the one candidate was cursing throughout his interview. And
Oh, geez.
for me, that's unprofessional. I know every place of work is different and everyone's different and it's 2025, but for me, I would never, I don't curse in general, but certainly not during an interview.
Absolutely
Uh,
not. Well, I've had all things happen to me over my career in recruiting. I've seen people show up. I've seen hiring managers show up bad. I've seen there's just so many crazy stories
any
of
strange outfits? Have you had any
yeah,
of those
oh my gosh,
experiences?
they're the worst. Some people show up or they look like they rolled out of bed in the morning and I'm like, "What happened? Did you not know you were meeting with me?" Like I just, I still think I don't care if it's a hoodie or whatever. That doesn't bother me. But when you show up and you look unkempt to me or like you just rolled out of bed or have a really bad
Right.
hangover, I'm little suspect on whether you really want the job. So yeah, I've seen some crazy things over time. I had a guy drink in an interview. Yeah, he was like drinking what was he told me it was like some kind of wine and I was like, what
Really?
is happening right now?
Just to settle the nerves.
Yeah, that's what it was. He didn't
Just
have to
some
tell
nerve
me about
settling.
it though. It was so bizarre.
Yeah. I mean, have you had anything that someone said that was just like you couldn't believe it? Like it was like personally offensive to you, or it just showed like a lack of consideration or awareness or anything like that?
I have I've had some very like borderline racist comments made to me, which are a struggle for me, of course,
Right.
and then I've had just some wackadoo comments like I only want to work 20 hours, but I want a 40-hour an hour week job, and I'm like, wait a minute, did you just tell me you're not going to work hard? Like I've had
Right.
those kind of comments happen to me. And I've also had, I think what people don't think are weird questions. Listen, I don't have a problem with you asking about benefits and things like that. But when we're in a first interview and you're asking me, how do I get more vacation than when it's allotted to me? Like things that aren't really bad questions, but they alert me to things that are going on maybe in your personal life or your work ethic that start
Right.
to worry me, right? And so I ask people to craft their questions before they go into an interview really carefully, right? I want you to interview the company just as much as they should be interviewing you, but I want you to be careful about how you ask those questions,
Mm,
and be
I like that.
considerate and professional at all times, right? And you never, even if they stray from professionalism, you shouldn't. And that's a big deal.
It reminds me of this one tale I heard while in the military. When you get to your ship or your commander's different positions, and some of them are positions that you can work for and have that, doesn't come with your rank and rate already. And I remember this one guy, he got to the command and instead they encourage you to ask questions, find the person who's already doing the job and say, hey, how did you work your way up to this, special position? Is there anything I can do? X, Y, Z. Are there programs I can do? How do I have to put in extra hours? I remember this one guy showed up. They told me the story. He showed up and they said, "Oh, are you the new guy?" He goes, "Yeah, I'm the new guy. I'm actually the guy here to take your job." And it's like he was like, don't ever show, especially in the military, you don't go up to
Right. I was
someone
about to
who's been
say,
doing that
in the
position for a while
military
and
doesn't
saying,
seem too good.
"Yeah." He goes, "Actually, I'm the new and better you."
Oh,
Yeah, you can't be
wow.
saying stuff like that. I mean, it's confidence. I'll give you that, but yeah, it's again,
Yeah,
it's
let's
like
not show
those
our
people don't want to
narcissism
help
from day
you.
one.
They don't want to
Yeah.
help you if you say, "Hey, I really
Right.
want to also, have that position. I'm working towards
Sure.
that." Like you said, the way you word things and go about things, you have to be
Yes.
so mindful of how other people are going to interpret them. I mean, it's the same with any relationship and communication. You have
Absolutely.
to understand that the way you present may not be the way it's coming off, internally versus externally. And then
Absolutely.
I'd love to ask, I know we've made a lot of progression in terms of women in the workplace, but have you
Yeah.
experienced sexism during the
Oh, of course.
interviews or in recruiting process or at any time?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, my favorite is, I have done a lot of the executive level roles in the past. And, I've been called girl during my interviews.
Hmm.
I've done, I've had interviewed CEOs who were like, well, I just don't, I don't believe in women in leadership. Women should be at home. I mean, like, it's just, people will say anything. And you know what's funny? They may not say it on their next interview, but they will say it to a recruiter because they also undervalue the job of the recruiter.
Mm.
And if you undervalue my job, which is to get you to the next step, to me, that's also a huge red flag. But women, and I don't think men always think about the things that they say and how they're perceived um, to a woman in the workplace. I mean, I'm in the workplace. You shouldn't say things like that to me. Even if you
Yeah.
believe them, you should keep them to yourself, right? And I think I felt like we were doing better at this and we're getting better at this, but it is definitely still prevalent in the C-suite level of people. It's still a thing. It's still, keep the women out of the boardroom type of idea, and it's just it's actually sad to see, but it's still very much there. And I think this changes too as we change generations. I'm Gen X, and so I think the generations after me are getting better at this type of thing. For us, the boomers and Gen Xers still are holding on to a lot of those old traditional kind of values still. And as we move through the generations, we're getting better at addressing some of these things up front, which is great, which is great. I'm excited for my children, right? That they don't have to go through some of the stuff that I had to go through. So that's exciting.
Right. And you know what? I do want to go back. We kind of skipped one part, which was you
Sure.
talk about no one grows up saying, I want to be a recruiter. So how did you end up being a recruiter in the first place?
Oh my gosh, long story. So I was in hospitality actually for a very long time. I managed bars and hotels and then went to foods, consumer foods. And I was tired of it, to be honest with you. It was a lot of late nights, a lot of factory work, just a lot of work in working into the wee hours of the night. And, after years of working 100-hour work weeks, I was like, this is enough, right? And I was getting older and needed to pivot out of my career. And I had worked with so many people over time in my time in hospitality, hired hundreds of people over time, that it seemed like a natural step for me to work with people in some fashion. And HR is not really my thing. I don't, the compliance and the benefits and all that stuff didn't appeal to me. But what did appeal to me is working with people to get them a job. And so I ventured out and got my first job at a recruiting agency, and they gave me a chance and I excelled at it. And I actually loved the work so much that I've stayed in it now. But it was It was definitely not my dream job, but it definitely has become a great career in people, and I love it. So yeah, totally fell into it. There's actually a great meme of a guy like rolling down the driveway, and people recruiters always put it up, and that's kind of how you fall into recruiting. It's definitely not, a a thing you're saying on to your mom at 4 years old, what do you want to be when you grow up? You're not saying you want to be a recruiter.
Right. And you know what?
Mhm.
It's not all rainbow and sunshine because we mentioned
Yeah.
earlier that you have people's careers in your hand. And so what I
Yes.
want to ask, which most people don't focus on, is how do you, Ms. Desiree, deal with the pressure and the guilt almost of having to turn people down? You've
Yeah.
got three or five great candidates. They're all perfect fit for their job, and they all need this. This is their
Yeah.
like life-changing moment.
Yeah.
And you have to call them and say, "I'm sorry, we selected someone else." I mean, how have you dealt with that kind of guilt in those conversations? Sometimes they're bursting into tears. I mean, how do
Yeah.
you
I've
handle
had
that?
a lot of crying in my career. Um, I will say that, and people, especially in this economy in the last 3 years, it's devastating. They've been on the market for a year, sometimes two. And they're at their last dollars in their account, and
Yeah,
they cry, and or they're super angry at the decision. So you have to deal with all of it, all the emotion you have to deal with. And I think it does carry a huge weight for recruiters, because if I had my way, everybody would have a job and have a living wage and have all
right,
these
of
things,
course.
right? Like I don't want anybody to lose a job. But I think there is management in the balance of things too. I think that finding the perfect person for that role who's extremely happy, so you have that conversation happen, and then you do have those decline, but that super happy one is so good that you can kind
Mm,
of ride that wave for a little bit. But every once in a while, you do get a little depressed about the fact that you have to decline so many people. I mean, if you're holding 20 to 30 job openings, just think about how many people you're declining in a week to 2 weeks.
right.
It's a ton of people, and it can feel like a lot of weight. I do a lot of self-meditation, de-stress things to make sure that my life has balance. But this can feel uh, really overwhelming at times. And I think if you don't practice self-care as a recruiter, you will struggle with it, unless you just have no emotion for other people, no empathy for other people. I think that you definitely feel the weight of it.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that's something we don't really think about. But outside of that, you love recruiting, and it sounds like it's taught you a lot about people, about how
Yeah.
people interact, and, taught you a lot of skills that you can implement into your life socially as a parent, as a partner, as a part of the community. You learn how to really talk with people, how to really read people. And I think that's a really interesting skill. I feel like it's one that I've learned from podcasting, same kind
Yeah,
of
I'm
thing.
sure.
Um, but, every now and then there may be a time where, someone puts on a facade and gets one past you. I mean, it's inevitable if you're, like you said, interviewing hundreds of people, you got several job
Yeah.
openings, and I get that. And but it sounds like such a great line of work, but it's not all you do. You also talked about do better counseling, and then other stuff that you're doing nowadays. So what kind of is the direction that you're trying to move your life in?
Yeah, so my career's been an interesting one, right? It's been very nonlinear, and it's sometimes I even do some speaking engagements about nonlinear paths and how they can still get to you where you want to be. Mine's been all over the place, and I still feel like I'm in the right place right now. I am back in marketing where I ended my hospitality career as a director of sales and marketing. Now I'm back in it again, and it's still for a talent company, but this is, I think, where I'm going to end my career in really bringing to life the messaging and storytelling, because I enjoy storytelling, of people and products and services to the market. The do better consulting piece of that is because I love working with individuals, get them the next step in their life, in their career, in the workplace, because I do believe that leaders, um, most leaders are just kind of, just like I say, fall into recruiting. They also kind of fall into leadership. Yes, they were probably really excellent at their job, but they got put into a leadership role without any training. And so I believe that, Do Better started because I started to talk to leaders and coach leaders on how to be better at creating cohesive teams. And as I was doing that work, I really found that leaders really didn't even know where to start. And so that piece of my life is something that I pick my clients very carefully. It's an augment to the work that I do in my full-time job. And it's because I just enjoy the results of what happens to teams and how performance changes and all of those things. That's exciting for me. So, I don't ever think I'll lose either one of these things, right? I think that the end of my career, Mr. Whiskey, I turned 50 last year, and I really had to do some self-reflection about where my career was going. And I think
Right.
I've gotten it to a really good place, and I would love to see until I retire, which hopefully is at 60, not, but hopefully it's at 60,
Mm.
60, 65. I feel like I've lived a really great life with great experiences, but I want to end my career here and then go on to some personal venture at the end. So it's exciting to be me right now. I feel like I'm in a really good place. It's awesome.
For sure. And we're going to have all your links in the description below for people to contact you, whether that's about speaking, coaching, or podcast guesting, whatever it may be. But we're all curious. I have to know, Ms. Desiree, do you have children? Is the first
I
question.
do. I have
All right.
two grown boys. They are
This,
old. They
then the
are
second
probably older
question,
than you, Mr. Whiskey.
the second question is, do they want to go into recruiting?
Absolutely not. I have no
Okay.
interest
I
whatsoever.
had to know. You said no one grows up want to be a recruiter, and I was wondering if you were whispering in their
No.
ears, like every time, they weren't looking, you were like, "Be a recruiter. It's fun."
No. Actually, you know what? It's funny. I had someone ask me if I ever thought about guiding my kids to this as a career path. And, I honestly told my sons that I wouldn't actually love to see them in this role. First of all, my sons are very different. One is in the military, and the other one is super creative. And I don't think either of them, their path is in that direction. But
Mm.
I want stability for them, and the recruiting and talent market is very volatile. And so, it's not for the faint of heart. And of course, as a mother, I want better for them.
There's still a chance with the military son being a
I
military
know.
recruiter, but it's a
I
different type of
know.
recruiting.
I know. He's an don't even say it. He's an intelligent. So I'm like hoping he goes some other path, but let's
Yeah.
hope for the best
He
there.
could end up being the guy who programs the AIs that replace your
Oh my
recruiting
God.
job.
Now he could be that guy. He could be that guy. So yeah, but yeah, no, they definitely didn't say that when they were young either. They didn't say we want to do what mommy does. That's none of that has ever happened.
Yeah, well, you know what? It's I respect you as a parent, not pushing onto your children. I am a child who lived what my parents wanted, not what I wanted. So, I turned out all right. Afterward I
Yeah.
kind of because I pivoted and was like, actually, forget y'all. I'm doing what I want. But I know there's a lot of people who don't have that beautiful opportunity to do so. So I appreciate you as a parent not one of the things we had said when I was creating the show was, you know, living out our parents' dreams and needing to, how do we rebrand and pivot our life from there? Because it's already just taken up all that time. But,
Yeah.
I also believe everything happens for a reason. Everything lines up pretty well. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, including, you getting sent my way to guest on the show. I've loved our conversation.
Thank
I
you.
love your energy, your enthusiasm, and I can already tell that you know, I might have to, change my name and look and try to, have you recruit me and then see, all right, now how's Ms. Desiree from the podcast guesting to when she's
To
recruiter mode is like
reality.
super serious. She's like, Iron Fist or, is it the same you?
No, I'm exactly the same way, which is why I think I've been successful. So, there's a lot of laughing and joking in my interviews. So, yeah, I love that to keep it on the first step. So I like to keep it kind of casual. So I love it. But this has
Yeah.
been great.
Yes, ma'am. So thank you for your time and for what you do. Like you said, and like we said, you've set up a lot of great careers for people, and you're continuing to not only do that on the one-to-one level as a recruiter, but by helping leadership and, businesses focus on workplaces that are inclusive, progressive, and, creating an environment where more people can thrive. You're helping contribute to that. So I thank you for that.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Sailing through the ocean blue, nuclear reactors my crew, guiding the ship, the stars as our guide, through the waves we ride, jokes and laughter fill the air. On this voyage we have to share, working together, side by side, as one family we will abide. In the heart of the ship we reside, nuclear operators with pride, powering the vessel with every stride. Our mission, a source of great pride.